Maya Williams stepped off the bus, her heart racing as she faced Clearview High School for the first time. The air was thick with the excitement of a new school year, but for Maya, this was just another fresh start, another place to be invisible. Little did she know the school bully had already set his sights on her. Bryce Carter, the untouchable quarterback, would make her life hell. But what he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Maya was no ordinary girl. Stay with me and watch how she turns the tables in a way no one saw coming. If you want to see more stories like this, hit that subscribe button now. Maya slowly walked through the crowded hallways of Clearview High, her footsteps echoing against the tiles as she tried to keep her head low. She wasn't here to make friends. She wasn't here to fit in. She was here to survive another transfer, another school where she'd be the outsider. It wasn't her first time. Moving had become a normal part of her life, one she had learned to navigate quietly, like a shadow that nobody noticed. But Clearview was different. The energy in the air was thick, filled with the buzz of students who had known each other. For years, their laughter and casual chatter wrapping around her like a constant reminder that she was alone. She could feel the stares from students she passed, some curious, some dismissive. They could already tell she didn't belong. Maya found her locker and forced a deep breath, her fingers shaking slightly as she twisted the combination dial. She couldn't afford to get distracted, not now. She had to stay focused. It was a routine she knew all too well. Find her locker, avoid confrontation, pick the quietest seat in every class, and make it through the day. If she stayed invisible, she could make it through without being noticed. But life had other plans. As Maya pulled open her locker, she caught sight of him. Bryce Carter. He was impossible to miss. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of effortless swagger that only comes from years of being on top of the social food chain. He stood there, leaning casually against a row of lockers, surrounded by his pack, his group of jocks who hung on to every word he said. Maya had seen this type before, the ones who thrived on their power over others, the ones who liked to make you feel small without lifting a finger. Bryce's sharp eyes scanned the hallway, his gaze pausing on her for just a moment, but it was enough. Maya felt the weight of his attention, and before she could react, one of his friends shoved past her in the narrow hallway, knocking her books from her arms. The thud of her textbooks hitting the floor was like a signal, and the group of boys erupted into laughter. Maya's face flushed, but she didn't let it show. She bent down quickly, ignoring the burning in her cheeks, as her books scattered in every direction. Well, what do we have here? The voice was smooth, laced with mockery. Maya didn't need to look up to know who it was. Bryce. Of course it was him. She could hear the chuckles behind him. The pressure of the moment hit her all at once. Every part of her wanted to snap, to react, to fight back. But she didn't. Instead, she grabbed her books and stood up, brushing past him without a word. Her fingers were trembling, but she didn't let her body betray her. "Hey, where's your manners?" Bryce's voice rang out louder this time, forcing her to stop in her tracks. Maya didn't respond, just kept walking. But she knew he wouldn't. Let it slide. Not with the crowd watching, not with his pride at stake. She felt a sharp tug on her backpack, a firm yank that pulled her back slightly, just enough to remind her that Bryce wasn't going to back off easily. Maya turned around, slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The hallway had gone silent. Even the students who had been ignoring them now turned to watch, their eyes darting between her and Bryce. For a moment, she could feel the weight of every gaze, every expectation. This was it. This was when she would either stand her ground or break. Bryce stood in front of her, arms crossed, his usual smirk spreading across his face. "You really think you can just walk away from me?" he taunted. For the briefest second, Maya saw something flicker in his eyes, something unexpected. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was surprise. But whatever it was, it only lasted a moment before his arrogance returned. "You're kind of weird, you know that?" Bryce's words were smooth, but they didn't have the bite he was hoping for. He tilted his head as if waiting for her to react. Maya didn't answer. She just held his gaze, unflinching. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She didn't feel small. Without breaking eye contact, Maya took a deep breath and turned around. She wasn't going to let him win, not with his words, not with his games. She kept walking, the sound of her footsteps louder now in the eerie silence of the hallway. She heard Bryce's voice again, calling after her, but this time, it didn't faze her. "What's your problem?" he yelled, but Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Maya's world shifted when the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. She was heading to the bus stop when she heard a voice behind her. "Hey, new girl." Bryce's voice was sharp, a challenge. She turned slowly, already knowing what was coming. Bryce was standing a few feet away, his friends hanging back, waiting to see what he would do next. Maya stayed calm. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady. Bryce took a step closer, a grin spreading across his face. "You think you're better than me?" This was it, the moment she'd been dreading. She could feel her pulse quicken, but she wasn't afraid. She let out a short laugh. "I think," she said slowly, "that you should walk away." For a brief moment, Maya thought Bryce would take the bait. He stood there, jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. But then, to her surprise, something changed. "I don't take orders from you," he said, his voice lower now, the cocky edge replaced by something else. Maya didn't flinch. She wasn't here to fight. She wasn't here to prove herself. She lifted her phone, her fingers brushing the screen. And then, she pressed a button. The sound of a roaring engine filled the air, loud enough to drown out the tension that had been building between them. Maya looked at Bryce one last time before stepping aside as a sleek black Dodge Charger Hellcat pulled up next to her. The tinted windows rolled down slowly, and there behind the wheel sat none other than Vin Diesel. Bryce's smirk vanished instantly, his face turning pale. His friends stared in disbelief. Maya turned to face Bryce, smiling for the first time that day. "Still think I'm weird?" she asked. Bryce didn't answer. For the first time in his life, he had no words. Maya couldn't stop thinking about the look on Bryce's face when Vin Diesel's Charger pulled up beside her. The way his confident smirk crumbled into sheer disbelief was the most satisfying thing she'd ever experienced. She sat quietly, the passenger seat, her fingers still trembling slightly, but the rush of having turned the tables on Bryce was intoxicating. Yet as Vin drove her through the streets of Houston, a thought lingered in her mind. She was no stranger to running away from things, starting over in new schools, keeping her head down, hiding from confrontation. But now, she had just made an enemy of the most powerful guy at school. Bryce Carter was no one to mess with, and Maya knew that. She wasn't naive. As they turned a corner, she looked over at Vin, who kept his eyes focused on the road. He was always so calm, like nothing could shake him. Maya felt a twinge of unease. What if Bryce didn't let it go this time? What if things got worse? Vin's voice broke through her thoughts. "You okay?" His tone was casual, but Maya could sense the underlying concern. Maya exhaled slowly, trying to calm her nerves. "I'm fine. She paused, her words caught in her throat. "I don't want this to spiral. I just want to go to school, not deal with this. But I know he won't let it go." Bryce isn't the type to back down. Vin glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You've got this." He's used to being on top, right? People like that don't like losing. They'll try to get it back, but it's up to you whether you let them. Maya nodded, but a deep sense of uncertainty clung to her. There was a part of her that hated conflict, that wanted to keep quiet and just be left alone. But another part of her, something deep inside, knew she couldn't walk away now. She had done something that no one else would have dared. She had stood up to Bryce, and now it was too late to turn back. As they pulled into a quiet suburban neighborhood, Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting to see messages from friends or, more likely, gossip about the scene that had just played out in front of the school. But instead, The screen flashed with a notification. Maya Williams' new girl. A thread started by none other than Bryce's best friend, Ryan. The post was filled with mocking memes, jokes at her expense, and cruel comments about her Vin Diesel moment. There was no doubt about it. Bryce's friends were making sure the whole school knew what had happened. But that wasn't what caught Maya's attention. It was the comments under Ryan's post. Some students were laughing along, but others were questioning Bryce's actions. Bryce, you really let her talk back to you? That girl's got some guts. Maybe she's not the one you want to mess with. Maya stared at the screen, feeling a mix of pride and dread. Bryce was losing his grip, and Maya could feel it, but she wasn't sure what to do next. Should she confront him again? Should she let it play out and hope that he would crumble on his own? Her heart raced as the uncertainty settled in. As Vin pulled into their driveway, Maya tried to shake off the unease. She was grateful for the peace she felt here in the quiet of their home. She stepped out of the car, but before she could head inside, a voice called out from next door. Maya! She turned to see Mr. Jacobs, the neighbor who lived 2 houses down, walking toward her with a concerned look on his face. Maya had known him for years. He'd been a family friend since her parents moved to Houston, and she'd always appreciated his down-to-earth nature. He was a retired police officer, a calm, level-headed man who had always given her solid advice. Hey, Mr. Jacobs, Maya said, forcing a smile. You all right? He eyed her carefully, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. I saw that scene outside the school today. With that boy, Bryce. Is everything okay? Maya hesitated, feeling the weight of his gaze. Yeah, it's fine. Just, you know how high school is. Boys like Bryce think they can bully everyone around. But I'm okay. Mr. Jacobs raised an eyebrow. I've seen my share of bullies, Maya. But I can tell you one thing. When a bully gets embarrassed, especially one like Bryce, they don't let it slide. You've made an enemy of someone powerful. You need to be careful. Maya's stomach tightened. I know. I don't want to make things worse, but I couldn't just let him push me around. Mr. Jacobs nodded slowly, his face softening. I get it. You've got a lot of strength in you. But it's not just about standing up to him now. It's about understanding what comes next. Sometimes bullies get dangerous when they feel like they've lost control. You've got to be ready for what he might do. Maya swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. What should I do? Stay smart, stay safe, he said, his voice low but firm. And if things get out of hand, don't be afraid to let someone know. People like Bryce, they're not used to being knocked down, and when they do get knocked down, they fight back harder. Just remember you've got a strong family and a strong support system. Don't face it alone. Maya nodded, feeling a chill run down her spine. Mr. Jacobs was right. She hadn't really thought about what would come after the confrontation. What if Bryce retaliated? What if he went further than just making fun of her or making her the target of his jokes? As she stepped inside the house, her mom, Rachel, looked up from the kitchen, a concerned frown on her face. Maya, what happened today? The school called. They said something about a incident. Maya sighed, setting her backpack down by the door. It's nothing, just some guy at school trying to act tough. He's been bullying me a little, but I stood up to him. Rachel's eyes softened, but there was something in her gaze that made Maya uneasy. Are you sure that's all? You know you can tell me anything, right? Maya paused, then nodded. Yeah, it's just high school stuff. I'm handling it. Rachel stood up and walked over to her, putting a hand on her shoulder. I know, you are. Just be careful, okay? You're strong, Maya, but sometimes it's the ones who seem the strongest that end up needing help. Maya met her mom's gaze and gave a small smile. I will. Thanks, Mom. But even as she tried to reassure her mother, the reality of the situation weighed heavily on her. Bryce wouldn't let it go. He couldn't. He was a predator, and she was his prey. And as much as Maya wanted to pretend that she had everything under control, she couldn't ignore the truth. She had just started a war. The question was, how far would Bryce go to win? And more importantly, how far was Maya willing to go to make sure she didn't lose. The war begins. Bryce's first strike. The next morning, the air felt heavier than usual. Maya woke up to the harsh sound of her alarm clock blaring, but it wasn't the noise that startled her. It was the weight of what she had done the day before. As she pulled on her uniform and grabbed her bag, her mind kept replaying the events. The smirk wiped off Bryce's face, the way his friends backed off in silence. She had won, right? But then why did she feel so unsettled? When she stepped outside, the sun was already high, casting long shadows on the pavement. The streets of Houston felt eerily calm, but Maya knew she was heading into battle. She wasn't sure if she could call it a victory just yet. Bryce wasn't the kind of guy to take a loss lying down, and she knew retaliation was inevitable. The question was, how far would he go? As Maya sat in the back seat of Vin's car, the silence between them stretched. Her fingers drummed anxiously on her lap, each tap echoing in her mind. "You okay?" Vin's voice broke through the tension, a calm but perceptive note that was always there, like a protective barrier. He didn't need to ask. He already knew something was weighing on her. Maya nodded. I don't know if I'm ready for what happens next. Bryce won't just forget about yesterday." Vin turned the wheel, glancing at her out of the corner of his eye. "You've already made your move. You can't control how he reacts, but you can control how you handle it. Don't let him define your next steps." Maya exhaled deeply. "I know. It's just, he has a way of making people feel small. I'm not sure I'm ready for him to go after me to really hurt me." "Don't worry," Vin said softly. "You're stronger than you think." Maya appreciated his words, but the truth was she had never been this nervous about standing her ground. She had survived her fair share of bullies, but none had been like Bryce Carter. None had commanded the room the way he did. And now, Maya had no choice but to face him head-on. The moment she walked into the school, the tension hit her like a physical weight. Whispers followed her down the hall, students exchanging glances as they passed by. Maya's pulse quickened, but she didn't stop. She wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her rattle. Not today. When she passed by the lockers, she saw Bryce for the first time since the confrontation. He was leaning against the lockers, his usual group of jocks surrounding him. But today, there was something different about him. His usual cocky grin was gone, replaced with a tightness in his jaw and a look of frustration that Maya had never seen before. For the first time, Bryce didn't look like the untouchable king of the school. He looked like a man on the edge. Maya kept walking, trying not to make eye contact, but Bryce's voice rang out, cutting through the chatter in the hallway. "Hey, Maya." She froze, her breath catching in her throat. His voice wasn't taunting this time, it was cold, calculated. She could feel the weight of his anger pressing down on her, like a storm ready to break. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze for the first time that morning. "What do you want, Bryce?" He took a step toward her, his face hardening. "You think you're better than me, huh? You think you can just make a fool out of me and get away with it?" Maya held her ground. "I didn't make a fool out of you. You did that yourself. You couldn't handle being put in your place." For a brief second, she saw his hands twitch like he was ready to strike, but he didn't. Instead, he gritted his teeth and took another step forward. "You don't get it, do you? People like me don't let people like you walk all over them. You've made a mistake, Maya. A big one." His words were low, venomous, and Maya could see the fire burning behind his eyes. Maya didn't flinch. "You think this is over? It's just getting started, but don't worry, I'll let you dig your own grave. You always do." Bryce's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Maya thought he might actually hit her. But he didn't. Instead, he turned, his friends following him as they walked down the hall, their eyes lingering on Maya with a mix of anger and confusion. As she watched them disappear into the distance, Maya felt the anxiety rise in her chest again. She wasn't scared of Bryce, but the thought of what he might do next made her stomach churn. Later that day, Maya found her locker vandalized. Her books were scattered across the floor, and the metal door of her locker was covered in graffiti, slurs, insults, and crude drawings. It was Bryce's mark, unmistakable. The sight made her stomach drop. This was his retaliation. But instead of reacting, Maya did what she did best. She stayed calm. She bent down and picked up her books, ignoring the eyes of the students around. She didn't let them see her shake. She didn't give Bryce the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. Her mind raced as she stacked her books neatly, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't just a petty high school prank. This was Bryce telling her that he wasn't going to stop. This was him showing her that he could, and would, make her life miserable. But she wasn't going to give him that power. Not today. Not ever. As she stood up and closed her locker, she could feel Bryce's eyes on her. She didn't need to look back to know he was watching, and she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Later that night, Maya sat in her room, the weight of the day still hanging heavily on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed, and she picked it up, her heart racing as she saw a new message from an unknown number. The message was a simple text. "You've made a huge mistake. I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." Maya's breath caught in her throat. The message was a direct threat, and it made her stomach twist with anxiety. She wasn't just dealing with a school bully anymore. Bryce was playing for keeps. This was a game of power, and he wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. She gripped her phone tightly, staring at the message. She had a choice to make. She could back down, retreat into the shadows, and let Bryce continue to control her life. Or she could stand tall and face him head-on. Maya knew the answer. She wasn't going to let him win, and this time, she wasn't going to fight alone. The final confrontation, Maya's moment of truth. The school bell rang, signaling the start of another day, but to Maya, it felt like the calm before the storm. She had known for days that the situation with Bryce would only escalate. What she didn't know was how far he would go to take back his control. The haunting message she had received the night before weighed heavily on her mind. "I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." As she walked through the school doors, Maya couldn't shake the tension in her body. Every student in the hallway seemed to stare a little longer, whisper a little louder. She could feel their eyes on her, the mixture of curiosity and judgment in their gazes. It was like she had become the subject of an unspoken game, the girl who dared stand up to Bryce Carter, the untouchable king of Clearview High. Maya walked through the hallways with purpose, keeping her head held high, but inside, her heart was beating faster than ever. She could feel Bryce's presence before she even saw him. It was like a shadow that lingered, a reminder that he was always watching, always waiting for her to slip up. She didn't want to look back, but when she passed by his locker, she couldn't help herself. There he was, Bryce leaning against the metal lockers with his usual smug grin. His eyes locked onto hers the moment she passed by, his gaze sharp, piercing. For a moment, everything around her seemed to fade into the background. There was only Bryce and the growing tension between them. She could feel his gaze on her back as she walked past, but this time, something in her shifted. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't intimidated. Bryce called out to her, his voice cutting through the hum of the hallway. "Maya," he sneered. "You really think you can just mess with me and get away with it? Do you think you're better than me?" Maya stopped, her body rigid with the tension she had been holding in. She turned slowly, her gaze meeting his, steady and unflinching. She could see it in his eyes. He was cornered. The power he had once wielded so easily was slipping through his fingers, and it made him dangerous. He was desperate now, angry, but Maya wasn't going to let him take back control. "Not anymore. I don't think I'm better than you," Maya said, her voice low, but her words filled with conviction. "I just think I'm done letting you push me around, and I'm done playing by your rules." For the first time, Bryce faltered. His smile dropped, replaced by a look of cold fury. His eyes flashed with something Maya had never seen before: uncertainty. It was as if he didn't know how to react to someone who wasn't scared of him. The fact that Maya wasn't trembling before him, wasn't begging for him to stop, threw him off balance. "Don't make me laugh," Bryce growled, taking a step toward her. "You really think you can beat me at my own game?" Maya's heart pounded in her chest, but her voice remained steady. "I'm not playing your game, and I never will." Before Bryce could respond, Maya turned on her heel and walked away, but she didn't leave with fear or regret. She left with the certainty that things were about to change. The tension in the air was thick, but it wasn't just Bryce who felt it. The entire school was watching, waiting for the next move. By lunch, things had escalated. Bryce had made sure of it. As Maya entered the cafeteria, she immediately felt the eyes on her. Whispers followed her every step, but there was a new energy in the air, one that she hadn't felt before. The students around her weren't laughing at her. They were watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. Some were curious about how this drama would play out, while others seemed to be silently rooting for her. Maya made her way to the lunch line, her head held high, but inside, she was bracing herself for the storm. She didn't know what Bryce had planned, but she knew he wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. And then, she saw it. Bryce was sitting at his usual table, his friends surrounding him. He was watching her, his eyes narrowed, and the smirk that had once been so full of confidence was now a sneer, twisted with frustration. He called out to her again, his voice loud, making sure everyone in the cafeteria could hear. "Hey, Maya," Bryce shouted. "You still crying about your little locker?" The room fell silent, the tension crackling in the air. Maya could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on her. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything. She had to choose. She could let Bryce humiliate her, let him take the spotlight and drag her through the mud, or she could fight back. She didn't hesitate. Maya grabbed her tray, her hand steady despite the storm raging inside her. She turned and walked toward his table, her steps deliberate and calm. As she passed by, she caught Bryce's eye, and this time she didn't look away. She stopped in front of him, her heart racing but her face calm. "You think you're tough, huh?" she asked, her voice cool and even. "Just because you've got a bunch of friends to back you up? You think you're untouchable?" Bryce's eyes flickered with anger, but he didn't speak. The crowd around them was dead silent, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Maya leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "You keep bringing up my dad, but you don't get it. You're not the one who's untouchable. You're the one who's scared. You're scared of losing. You're scared of not being the center of attention anymore. And that's why you keep pushing. You don't know what it's like to be vulnerable, to be real. You don't know how to lose." Bryce's jaw clenched, and for a moment Maya thought he might snap. His hands were curled into fists, his knuckles turning white, but he didn't strike her. He just stared at her, his face contorted with rage. "You don't know me," he spat. "You think you've won? You're nothing." Maya shook her head, slowly. "I think you're the one who's nothing, and that's what scares you." The words hung in the air, and for the first time Maya saw it. The crack in Bryce's armor. The smirk was gone, replaced by something more raw, more vulnerable. And just as quickly as it appeared, it disappeared, replaced by the arrogant, cruel Bryce that Maya had come to know all too well. Without another word, Maya turned and walked away. This time, there was no hesitation. She didn't need to prove anything to him. The moment had passed. That afternoon when Maya was walking to her locker, she found it. This time, it wasn't vandalism. It was something worse. A picture of her, captured during her confrontation with Bryce in the cafeteria, had been plastered all over the school with a caption reading, "The girl who thinks she's better than the king." Maya's stomach turned. Bryce had turned the tables again, but this time something was different. The students weren't laughing. They were looking at her with a mixture of respect and curiosity, and as Maya stood there facing the crowd, she realized the truth. This was no longer about Bryce. It wasn't about his power. It was about hers. The power to stand tall in the face of everything he threw at her. The power to remain calm when the world around her seemed to be falling apart. the power to keep going when it seemed like there was nothing left to fight for. Maya wasn't the same girl who had walked into Clearview High just a few days ago. She had changed, and as she stared at the crowd, she knew it. She had won. The final act, victory beyond the surface. The last few weeks had felt like a blur of tension, confrontation, and survival. Maya had fought harder than she ever thought she could, not with her fists, but with her mind and her resolve. Bryce Carter, the untouchable king of Clearview High, had tried everything to break her. He used intimidation, humiliation, and fear. But Maya stood tall through it all, never once losing her sense of self. As the final bell rang on the last day of the semester, Maya stood in front of her locker, her fingers running over the familiar combination lock. The school year was over, but the battle she had fought was far from forgotten. She had won, not because she had defeated Bryce in some dramatic showdown, but because she had refused to let him, or anyone else, define her. The whispers had stopped. The students who once gossiped behind her back were now giving her space, but also a certain respect. Maya knew it wasn't about the status she had gained. It was about the quiet strength she had found within herself. Bryce's power, built on fear and intimidation, had been broken, not by her actions alone, but by his own inability to keep control. His attempt to make her the joke had only turned the spotlight on himself. Maya knew what she had done. She had never needed to prove anything. In the face of every obstacle, she had remained steady, unshaken. She didn't need the world's validation. She had learned that the most important thing was her own belief in who she was. And that belief had carried her through the storm. As she walked through the hallways one last time, the weight she had carried for so long seemed to lift. There was no more uncertainty hanging over her. There was no more fear. Maya had proven that power built on fear was never lasting. She had exposed it for what it was, empty, fragile, and ultimately self-destructive. It was a quiet victory, but a victory nonetheless. At the end of the hallway, she spotted Vin, leaning casually against the wall with a small smile on his face. He had been there for her when she needed him most, not with answers, but with the steady presence of someone who believed in her, even when she doubted herself. He had never pushed her to do anything she wasn't ready for, but when the time came, he had given her the tools to take control of her own life. She approached him, her steps lighter now. "You know," Vin said as she got closer, "I knew you had it in you. The world doesn't expect people like you to stand up and say, 'Enough.' But you did." Maya smiled, her heart full of gratitude for the support he had given her. "I didn't realize how strong I was until I had to be." "You're stronger than you think," Vin said, his eyes meeting hers with quiet pride. "And sometimes that's all you need, to realize that you've always had the strength inside." Maya nodded, looking around the hallway one last time. The air felt different now, lighter, more open. It was as if a chapter had ended, and a new one was ready to begin. Back at home that evening, Maya sat at the kitchen table, her mom sitting across from her, watching her with an understanding smile. Rachel had been worried about her at first, especially after the locker incident, but now she could see the change in her daughter. "Mom," Maya said, breaking the silence, "I didn't just stand up to Bryce. I realized something. I don't need to prove myself to anyone. I don't need to fight every battle. What matters is that I'm true to myself. That's all that matters." Rachel smiled warmly, proud of the person her daughter had become. "You've always been true to yourself, Maya. Sometimes it just takes a while for others to see it." That night, as Maya lay in bed, she thought back to everything that had happened. The bullying, the humiliation, the threats. They had all been a test of her character, of her resilience, of her ability to rise above the noise. And she had passed. She had proven that no one, no bully, no popular kid, no king of the school, could ever take away her worth. She was more than the labels that others put on her. She was Maya Williams, a girl who stood up when it mattered most, who stayed true to herself when the world tried to make her fit into its mold. And in the end, Maya knew that Bryce's downfall hadn't been about her winning. It was about him losing everything he thought he had. His power over others had been built on lies and fear, and in the end, he was the one left standing alone. Maya closed her eyes, letting the peace settle over her. She had faced her greatest fear and come out stronger on the other side. The future was hers now, and she was ready for whatever came next. With her head held high, Maya had learned the greatest lesson of all. True strength isn't about defeating others. It's about finding the strength within yourself to never let anyone define you. And with that, she knew nothing, not even the loudest bully, could ever take that away.